All right, can you give me like just 10 seconds? Start. I've got to time myself. I have Hi everybody, my name is Pragu Komulpati and welcome to my presentation on comedy. So before we start talking about comedy, I want to tell you a little joke. What happens when a frog's car breaks down on the side of the road? It gets towed. Yeah, so that was a pretty bad joke. Some of you didn't laugh at it, I could tell. But the definition of comedy is professional entertainment consisting of jokes and satirical sketches intended to make the audience laugh. I was technically being comedic or funny because I tried to get you to laugh. Try. So before we go over what comedy, the uses, and how it can be useful, I think it's first important to go over like just some basic types of comedy. So the first type of comedy is called affiliative humor. So affiliative humor involves telling jokes about everyday life, something that everybody can relate to and something everybody can understand. This is really popular in the comedy world, and one person that does it the best is comedian Jerry Seinfeld. The next type of comedy that you might have seen in the years before is aggressive humor. This is the type of humor you'd probably see from your friendly neighborhood bully or somebody who really hates you, and they just try to put you down. That's the kind of aggressive humor. Next type of humor is called self-enhancing humor. So this type of humor is when you put yourself down a little bit, but kind of rise you back up. For example, the famous comedian Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. He does this really well. He says, like, I'm not the brightest, I don't know much, but... So what he's doing in this case is he's putting himself down a little bit, but then he's willing to open himself up and get more information out of it. This is a really healthy and positive way to express humor. The last type, kind of similar to self-enhancing humor, is self-defeating humor. This is the biggest type of humor that I see in high school. A lot of kids are like, I suck at this, I'm going to fail my bio test, I have to work my butt off for the next math final, I suck. That's the type of self-defeating humor. Like, you're not bringing yourself back up, you're just saying that I suck at everything. So, this is a really good quote from Joanne Rivers, who's a famous aggressive comedian. She says, we're all laughing so much because life is so horrible. There are different types. So what I'm trying to get here before we dive in is that comedy is multifaceted. It can be good or bad. There's many different types. And I'm going to be focusing more on the good uses, but even before we start going into that, I think it's really important to acknowledge that there are different sides of it, but it's really healthy and it's needed. So, why do humans find something funny? Like, why do we even want funniness going through our brain? So, there's a field called gelotology. And this field, I didn't know existed until like last week. This is basically the field of laughter and comedy. And so, when we feel laughter or we feel something that's really funny, it goes through our limbic system, which is right below the cerebellum, like right here, this yellow part. And the limbic system controls our self-preservation part of the brain. Now, this is really confusing. Why would comedy need to go through our self-preservation part? Well, it's because that we're social creatures. Before we were civilized, we used to live in tribes as humans. And as people say, safety in numbers. So this was really important for us, and that's why it goes through the self-preservation system. So as Scott Weems said, who has a PhD in psychology and gelotology, he says, one reason we enjoy humor so much is that our brain is hardwired to encourage us every time we get the joke. We are social creatures. Our brain is literally hardwired so that every time we get a joke or find something funny, it encourages us to be more social and a closer knit family. So another thing that's really important is, why do we use comedy or laughter? Like, we can use so many other things. Why comedy and laughter, and why is it useful? So the first theory, the oldest theory by far, is the superiority theory. This theory was used way back with Plato and Aristotle, and way back in Greece, ancient Greece. And probably the earliest theory that you heard of. This theory basically states that we use comedy to put ourselves above others. And you've probably heard this in like preschool or kindergarten, like, you want to go up on the swing, or you want to go on the swing, and there's the kid on the swing. You ask, can I go up? And he says, no, you poop pants, I'm better than you. It's my swing. That's the superiority theory. Next type of theory is the incongruity theory. So this one is basically, incongruity just basically means out of place, random, doesn't make sense. And it basically says that we find stuff funny because our expectations are up. We have no idea what's happening. It's like it's just so stupid it doesn't make any sense. For example, this joke. I have an EpiPen. My friend gave it to me as he was dying. It was really important that he gave it to me. Some people might find it funny because it doesn't make sense. The friend did not give you the EpiPen for you to have when he was dying. He gave you the EpiPen to save his life. So that's something like, it's just, why would he do that? That's like the incongruity theory. Next, the benign violation theory. This theory basically states that we find something funny because we violate it some way, whether it be physical, emotional, or moral norm. We just violate it a little bit, that's why it's funny, but it's relatively harmless. And the most accepted theory of psychologists and gerontologists is the release theory. This theory basically states that we use comedy as a good way to relieve stress and release tension. So comedy is also really important for social preference. Everybody has a preference on their favorite types of theories or their type of comedy, and this really helps you see who you want to be friends with. If you like this random, spontaneous incongruity theory, you're probably going to make friends with people who like that too and are good at it. So what happens? What happens to our body when we laugh or find something comedic? The first thing that happens is that our brain starts to secrete hormones. The first type of hormone is beta endorphins. These are basically a sort of pain suppressor. The next, probably the most known hormone, is dopamine, nicknamed the happiness hormone. And the most confusing one that our brain secretes when we feel something funny or comedic is these things called human growth hormones. So this really makes no sense. Human growth hormones help you grow and stimulate cell growth. So I was really confused on why we would need this in the first place. But laughing in comedy has some pretty profound effects on the body. First, it increases the flexibility of your blood vessels. Like when you laugh really hard, your blood vessels such as your veins and arteries actually increase in fitness. And because of those beta endorphins being released, you get a higher pain tolerance. That's why people sometimes use laughing gas when you're going through surgery or something painful, because your mind releases those beta endorphins and you have a higher pain tolerance. And also, because of those HGHs, or the human growth hormones, you actually get a reduced healing time from laughing or finding something funny. So laughing itself, how many of you guys, spend 10 minutes on a rowing bike every day, or bike 15 minutes, or maybe run 20 minutes every day as just an exercise? Yeah. Laughing 100 times is equal to both of them. Yeah. I know, I was just as surprised when I saw that too. 15 minutes on a bike? But laughing 100 times is but really hard in 100 times. But it's actually a pretty good exercise somehow. So this is the stuff. How this affects us as high schoolers. So high school, probably, as people say, the worst time to be alive. You have a ton of pressure everywhere. We know a lot of people that are going through depression. There's a ton of stress and anxiety. And we have a lot of psychological influences. So the first thing I want to talk about is depression. Here's just a couple facts. First of all, 30% of all high school teens, according to a 2014 study, feel sad or depressed. That's a really large number. That's 1 in every 3 kids that you know feel really sad or have depression. Next, 31% of kids skip meals because of depression and how sad they are. That's really bad at this age. At this age, we need to eat what we can because we're growing and our brain's developing. And last but not least, also, I think the most important, 36% of teens, because of depression, feel less motivated. Whether that be to do something you used to find fun, to do something you're passionate about. And once you lose something you're passionate about, you can't really get it back again. And so this is really important, and it's really sad. And whether you're in middle school, elementary school, before that, if you've ever had any high school friends, they're going to tell you the first thing about high school is that you get a lot of stress and anxiety. So high school teens have an average of 5.8 stress level out of 10. 5.8 out of 10. That's a little bit above average. What's really funny is all the adults in the room, even though you guys work hard, you give us a roof above our heads, you make sure that we get food on the table, you guys only have a 5.1 out of 10 stress rating. That means high school students actually have a higher time of stress and anxiety than most adults. And it's because of a ton of different factors. Whether it's social pressure, I don't know, finishing a bio quiz or bio project right before, the day it's due. And just a ton of different stuff, whether it be your parents or other extra homework. Also, 34% of teens also say that there's more stress next year than there is going to be this year. And as Dave Forrester puts it, who is a psychologist and therapist, without a doubt, there are huge increases in the number of teens coming to us with anxiety and depression. And he's completely right over that. Over the last decade, high school has no longer been a go-lucky, fun place, but rather a place where there's a lot of stress and anxiety. And the amount of teens with anxiety problems and depression problems have skyrocketed. So what are the psychological impacts? Like, what happens to your brain? The first thing it does is that it secretes these hormones, adrenaline and neoperipherin. And so these two hormones basically are really helpful back when we were not civilized. But now, have you ever been in a test and your hands get all sweaty, and then your feet start to wiggle, and your mind starts to go blank, and you get a lot of attention? That's these two hormones coursing through our body. And the last, most probably infamous hormone when it comes to stress and anxiety, cortisol. This is nicknamed the stress hormone. In small amounts, cortisol is needed. But in large amounts, especially when you're really hyped or when you're really tense and feel a lot of anxiety, it can lead to suppression of the immune system, increase of blood sugar and blood pressure, and decrease of eating, if you decrease in the wanting to eat, or the increase of obesity, the producing of acne. There's so many different things that cortisol can produce in large numbers. Also, a 2016 study found that these three things, stress, anxiety, depression, they're contagious. And this leads to what's been called the vicious cycle. The vicious cycle basically means your friend has depression or anxiety. Much higher chance he's going to give it to you, you're going to give it to your friend, and as school keeps going on, you're going to keep getting more anxiety, more stress, more depression, and you can keep going on and on. That's called the vicious cycle. So how can comedy help? So the first thing is it counters stress and anxiety. So we talked about before dopamine, beta endorphins. They're actually a complete counter to those other three hormones we talked about when you're stressed. Adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. They actually counter them, and it makes you feel a lot better. So you actually become more social once you feel comedic and try to laugh and have fun. Because chances are, as we explained in the beginning of my thing, we are social animals. And if you're funny, if you're comedic, if you're outgoing, you're going to be more social. And because of that, our brain's going to alleviate more pressure. We're going to feel less pressure. And for the mind and the body, there are a ton of different things. First of all, it stops the vicious cycle. Because, you know why? Laughter is also pretty contagious. Have you ever been laughing, and then your friend starts laughing, and his friend starts laughing, and you guys don't know why? It's because it's contagious. And in every way, it just stops the vicious cycle right in its tracks. It also helps the body in every way. Especially, as I said before, it helps fitness of blood vessels. And it can be used as exercise in some way. And most importantly, it's just a ton of fun. We have 2 weeks left, we're almost done, but taking our mind off school can help. We have finals, we have extra stuff. So, you know what, it's a lot of fun. And if you're not sure where to start about comedy, here's a few. These are my personal favorites. Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. He's probably my favorite comedian by far. If you're into ranting and roasting, he's the kind of guy for you. If you're into more of that affiliative humor, then the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, he's an everyday guy. You can relate to him in every way. And if you're more into that incongruity theory, the randomness, and hanging out with special guests, Stevie Colbert. So, thank you. If you have any questions, if you don't feel comfortable asking questions now, or if I don't get to you, those are my 2 email addresses. Feel free to send me any questions. Thank you.